It is Thursday, May the 11th. This is a Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee meeting, and thank you for coming. All right, this is a call to order. Meeting's officially started. Okay, how about a roll call of Ordinance Committee members?
Gary Talbot.
Here.
Bubba Harris.
Here.
Don Moscom.
Here.
Shane Mack.
Here. Okay. I'd like to start this meeting off by saying that this is a discussion of a lot of things in here, okay, that's on the agenda. There's nothing that has to go before the council tonight. There's just some things that I thought that we should discuss as a parish and as an ordinance committee meeting, ordinance committee, members to, see which way we want to go in the future on some things. So, that being said, I'd also like to thank the citizens of Livingston Parish that showed up to express their point of views and help direct us go in that right path, okay? Now, it would be to my preference that we go with the discussion and recommendations of amending section 1367.1C, commercial development buffer zones first. Now, let's talk about those proposed changes. Let me find my paperwork here. All right. That particular current ordinance, okay, that section C talks about a buffer zone between a residential and commercial piece of property. Okay, when you're developing the commercial piece of property, it says that you shall also have an 8-foot high solid wood fence. Well, no, the current ordinance says solid fence between the residential and institutional, commercial, and industrial developments or a public project, okay? And I think that all would agree that you would, that it's a good idea to have that fence, This was brought up by Mr. Bubba Harris, and so if you want to have something to say there.
On section C that you're looking at here, it said buffer zone shall consist of an 8-foot high solid wood fence, and this is already existing.
Well, wooden is what we're adding, though.
No.
Huh?
I know, Bubba's talking about if you look at, Bubba's talking about ordinance, section 451 of a different, in the code.
Yeah, that's already there.
That talks about a minimum buffer between conflicting uses.
Right.
So
Right.
So what happens, we're not consistent in our deal because our engineer will go look at the commercial development buffer zone when we're already addressing what Bubba's talking about in a different deal. So I think what we need to do, Bubba, if I'm not mistaken, is make them consistent to take the wording of the minimum buffer zone between conflicting uses and plug it into the buffer zone between commercials so we're consistent.
I totally agree, and so I guess we need to decide what we want to do and make them consistent so we don't conflict. And let me just also say, because I forgot, because I was so late and distraught, but if anybody in the audience, wants to make a comment, all you have to do is just raise your hand, and this is kind of not quite as formal as our council committee meetings. So you just raise your hand and we'll give you the floor. You can come up to the podium and express your opinion and say what you got to say, man. So, say that again?
If you're not
Instead of this?
Make a motion for
And,
this become the wording.
And let me also say that as we've changed a lot of ordinances in the past, a lot of the public input has helped us develop a better ordinance, so you're welcome. We encourage that, okay? So let's go ahead and move on. How do we want to modify 1367.1C? How would y'all like to do that? What do you recommend it should
Put
say?
this wording here with C over here.
I totally agree with
I
that.
think Bubba wants to make a motion to take section C of 14 4.51.
Right.
And move it and
To-
make that the wording of section 1367.1.
Definitely. I think
Yes.
that's a great idea.
Sandy, y'all got that?
Yes.
And we're not gonna address the 1 foot from the property line. We're not gonna address the planning director having a waiver. We're gonna move the wording of that one straight to the wording of the other one, so they're consistent throughout.
What is the exact word?
The wording says in C, currently on commercial development buffer zones, it says a buffer zone shall have an 8-foot high solid fence between the residential and institutional, commercial, or industrial development or public project. This fence shall be located within 1 foot of the property line unless approved by the planning director. But in section 451, on the minimum buffer zones between conflicting uses, it says a buffer zone shall consist of an 8-foot high solid wood, brick, or masonry fence between a residential and commercial, industrial, multifamily, religious, educational, institutional, or public property line. So we're trying to get this consistent because the engineer is going to go look under the commercial development and see this one buffer, this one section, and not realize that it doesn't, that there's another section in the ordinance that conflicts with it.
That's right.
So the problem is, they say because of what happens in section 13-67.1, they can put up a wood fence, chain link fence, they can put up all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to define it as a solid wood, brick, or masonry fence, so that you're not putting something industrial or commercial in somebody's residential property. You're going to have a more residential looking fence between the two properties, and we're going to eliminate the conflict in the wording because we like the part of the minimum buffer zone between conflicting zones. We like the wording that better. We're going to move it to the other part so that it's consistent
Right.
throughout.
Right.
I second.
We have a motion. We have a second. I call for the vote that we send this to the Ordinance Committee for an adoption. But we do have a member of the audience that would like to comment on this. So just come on up and tell us who you are and where you live. And
My name is James Camp, and I am a constituent of Bubba Harris.
okay,
And I think that everybody in the room can at least recognize, if not agree with me, that one of the most frustrating things we see go on down here is the council doing a resolution to waive certain portions of the Code of Ordinances.
Yeah.
So if you're changing this ordinance, I would recommend and suggest and strongly encourage you to go ahead and slip in a clause that says this cannot be waived.
Well, you know something? There's exceptions to every rule. And
Yeah.
I'm not interested in making that in my motion.
James, I understand what you're saying. And it's just like Mr. Talbot said. We don't like to make waivers. I don't like to make waivers, especially. Once in a great while, we have to do that. Believe it or not. So that's the reason we don't want to put it in here. Not to say that we would ever give a waiver on something like this. It's going to depend on what type of building is put up. My biggest thing right now is if you have, I hate to call the name of a bunch of stores that's come up in our area, but those is what we're trying to protect people from. Car washes, things of that nature.
James, I'll give
Just-
you a specific example. I'll tell you if we had zoning or we had commercial areas and residential areas, I wouldn't care if we had an issue where we said we couldn't put a waiver in. But let's take Amy Church Road as an example of a road that used to be residential that's becoming commercial from, starting at 16, moving toward 1019. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, it's moving that direction, okay? So given that situation, something is technically residential, but might be for sale for commercial. And some of that property is selling by the square foot. So what I'm saying is if I've got a piece of property, let's say, for example, for sale on Amy Church Road, and the guy next to me is building a commercial building, because technically they're mixed use right now, we have a set ordinance that would apply. But in reality, I'm trying to make my property commercial. I wouldn't care that we waived the conflict use part of that ordinance, because in essence, mine's going to become commercial at some point in time. So for somebody to have to pay, buy property by the square foot and then generate a 25-foot buffer zone, when in essence, the property next door is going to be commercial, it just isn't yet, then I can see where a waiver would be justified. But what you're asking us to do is tie our hands so that we can never grant a waiver. I'm not saying that I understand your point about waivers, but what I'm saying, there are situations when areas start transitioning, and if you don't have zoning, to create commercial zones or residential zones, then these transition areas at times, you need to have the ability, if a particular property owner doesn't care, to grant a waiver. That's all. That's my reasoning behind that.
You're welcome to talk as much as you want.
I completely understand the points that you're bringing up, and I don't disagree with them. But what I would say is that while we don't have zoning, somewhere back there, we do have a parish master plan that I know that the parish paid an awful lot of money to develop, and I don't think we've ever pulled it out, certainly not been implemented. Instances where things like what's going on over on Amen Church Road do begin to happen gradually enough
You got something else?
that it wouldn't be impossible for a well-seasoned ordinance committee to sit down and adjust the ordinance to accommodate that and still not rule with waivers.
I understand what you're saying. I'm going to tell you, we're going to discuss, believe it or not, there's an item on the agenda tonight that we're going to discuss part of the master plan. And part of the reason for the implementation or the lack of implementation is because there are parts of that master plan that cost a ton of money. You know what I'm saying? And so we're going to discuss one of those parts tonight that theoretically could cost a lot of money. We're going to talk about it later on. So to say that, I know that there was a master plan done and it had been implemented, but trust me, we've looked at, are there parts we can, and, are there parts we can afford to?
Yeah, call for the vote.
Can we go over what the vote is again?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't want to put the part about the plan director in there, the last sentence, you just want the first part?
We're just going to,
The whole entire part C?
the whole part C of 4.5 is going to replace the whole part C of 1367.
Okay.
So, Mr. Talbert,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Wascom?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
We get to make a favorable recommendation on that particular ordinance to the,
I'm going to need to type it up and pass it out when that agenda item
Okay.
comes up. Yeah, I have it.
Do we have to do it tonight?
well, we that's why we do the committee reports. We can do the introduction. We can do the introduction tonight.
That sounds good.
Get it over with.
Yeah, I don't I don't need another call.
Okay, next topic, or next item up for discussion. Can we go over C before we go over B? Because I think B is probably going to take a little while, and I think C will go a lot faster.
I'm all in favor of that.
So, item C is to review discussion and recommendation on the prohibition of putting mobile homes in established or new development subdivisions. And this was a recommendation or brought up to be discussed by Councilman Mr. John Wascom.
Thank you, Mr.
So you got the floor,
Thank
Mr.
you.
John.
Thank you, sir. What I've run into in my district and I'm sure we've all had this problem in the past. Let me tell you why I put this on the agenda tonight. In every council member's district, there is some very nice, high-quality subdivisions where people spend $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 to build a house. They submit the plans to the parish. The parish approves those plans with the intent of those subdivision lots being sold as houses being erected, and it becoming a nice neighborhood. At that point, the property in that neighborhood belongs to the homeowner, as it should. But what happens is the people together when they purchase those houses or those properties in that neighborhood, they enjoy the quality of the neighborhood. Well, here's what happens that I've had in some subdivisions, and I'm sure we all have, because each one of us have some very nice quality neighborhoods in our district. If that house gets torn down, caught on fire, or flooded for any reason, and it's removed, then you have these nice houses in a named subdivision that is accepted by the parish with the intent of being homes, and then somebody will take that empty lot and have moved a mobile home in there. Legally, there's nothing to stop someone from putting a mobile home in the middle of a subdivision with high-end houses, especially in these subdivisions that their lots are small, the houses are close together, and so there's nothing legally to stop that. We've always said, well, there's subdivision restrictions to try to stop that, but the problem is most subdivision restrictions aren't enforceable because there's other things that have gone wrong. So I've put together an ordinance. Miss Sandy has worked to do it, and I've run it by each. Sandy, do you have another copy? You have another copy handy? And I've put together this ordinance, and if you look at section 13-41.1, I'm going to read it, and it says this, that it shall be unlawful for a person to reside in or use as a residence a mobile home in an established and named subdivision or newly developed named subdivision that was accepted by the parish for the intent of single-family dwelling houses. And, you know, I think I'm the leader of wanting to protect individual property ownership rights. And I'm the hardest one to ever want to adopt an ordinance to tell someone what they can and cannot do with their homes. But there's 80 other people in this subdivision that are adamant about their investments in their property, and they're asking us to help. So I think this ordinance would be a great ordinance to adopt for this parish. It would give our executive branch the ability to not give a permit to put a mobile home smack dab in the middle of Easterly Lake subdivision or any other subdivision that's in this parish that people spend good money for. I'd like, you know, it don't have a name, but I kind of been referred to as just protect our neighborhoods ordinance. And so, you know, I'd like for y'all to consider putting this on the parish council committee tonight, and we'll introduce it, and then if there's some changes, if y'all have thoughts that you'd like to change, and at my request, Miss Sandy's done a good job of keeping this very slick, simple, clean, without a bunch of stuff, and you know, and anyway, I appreciate y'all's support on this, and if you have any input, let me know your thoughts.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
No.
Okay, like I live in a named subdivision.
Okay.
We had a disaster. I have a FEMA trailer next to my house
Okay.
that I'm residing in.
Okay.
Does that allow that if the parish comes in and grants a 18-month waiver on something like that, that it would?
That's what I was gonna ask.
You know, did they steal your thunder, Scott?
That's fine. I'm glad somebody's thinking. Because you're contradicting yourself.
What's that?
Provides for that.
Your first thing out of your mouth was a flood, a fire, or anything like that.
Go
You
ahead.
can't do it. So
Go ahead and
Scott
tell us.
Jones, District 6.
Scott who?
Scott Jones, District 6.
Scott Jones, District 6.
That's what Gary said is exactly what I
Oh,
was gonna
course.
say.
Are there provisions in place? that-
Well,
I mean, you have a natural disaster like.
so you said
last-
you would, yeah. So-
Last August, you would need to have something in place to protect these people.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
it's only for 18 months. You know what I'm saying? So
But
people
it's
can
not in there.
rebuild.
So you think, what are you saying? I guess I missed what you're saying, Scott.
Exactly what Gary just said. Is there a provision where in a
For
natural
hardship
disaster?
cases or disasters?
Yes.
Like we as a parish council determined after the flood, we granted an 18-month waiver on trailers, mobile homes, travel trailers on people's property.
Absolutely. And we
So-
all supported that.
So my only question was, if the parish grants a waiver now, after this ordinance is in place, are we still gonna be able to do that? Go ahead, Sandy.
We can go,
I
defer
got-
this to Mr. Chris Moody, but what we did to allow for the flood, it was an emergency ordinance
We-
allowing it, and we
right.
can always do that.
We can always-
That's all I want to
Right.
be sure of, that if we pass this, that we don't create a situation if we have another deal and I need to leave in a FEMA trailer, that my wife's gonna say, we can't move one because you voted for, so I mean, I want to be sure that,
No,
The intent here, y'all, is to protect the property value of the people that, when they purchased the property, there were restrictions on the property where, you had to have a home, have property values. And I do think that there are places within Livingston Parish where mobile homes are welcome, and I mean, a lot of the elderly, they retire in mobile homes, and I think a lot of the younger generation, they start off in mobile homes and stuff like that. But this is about, okay, you develop a subdivision and it's designed and intended to have certain size houses in it, okay? And to protect the people that want to live in that type, that paid that kind of money, protect those property values. You can't go put a mobile home right next door in that subdivision, okay? And so that's what this is about.
No, this
Of
was-
course,
yeah.
in hardship times, when there's emergency disasters and all this kind of stuff, we would write an emergency ordinance to allow mobile homes and to go
Well, I mean,
inside subdivisions and travel trailers. We
that's
we did all that.
that's all I want to be sure of, is that
Now,
if there's a situation. Now, what about the person whose house burns down and they want to move something in there temporarily while they reconstruct their house?
Well,
And that's another thing
I
too.
thought about that as well, but again, you can still do a variance for
Right.
a hardship case.
Right,
I
that's-
mean,
that's why I
That's why
think-
you have the ability to do variances.
I just want to be sure that we're not writing something so hard and fast that we
And,
we're painting
you know,
ourselves in a corner that we
Right.
can't help people out who are in need of help.
Fix it later.
I don't
Fix
think
it
that-
private, that's when you go to
That would be one of the
private.
cases where you may have to grant a waiver or pass emergency ordinance or something like that, but I do think you need to,
And to go along with what John's, excuse me, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Ms. Creekbaum, but go ahead and make sure everybody knows.
Okay, with all due respect, several statements that you said, Councilman Wascom, are not true. And what I'd like to say, the bright side of this is that we have the keys to preventing mobile homes in established restricted subdivisions. We have two keys to prevent that. The first is the subdivisions, whether it's older or not, newly developed subdivisions, the developer presents restrictions, covenants,
Right.
okay, that go with the deed to that development. Those are recorded in our courthouse. And until they are proven invalid or unenforceable, they are valid. They are recorded. The way that works, each person who buys a piece of property with a recorded set of restrictions, it's a contract. They own those restrictions. They own that piece of property, and they are bound to those restrictions. So they are valid until proven invalid. All right? That's your first key. When someone applies for a permit to place a mobile home on any piece of property, they have to apply to I think it's the planning department is where they apply. There is an application that is within the mobile home ordinance, the development of a mobile home park ordinance, there is an application for exceptions to the mobile home park ordinance, okay? Each family is allowed, or each property owner is allowed 3 exceptions. 2 of those can be for family members, and 1 can be for an exception of their choice. Suppose they have a close friend or a veteran that has a hardship, they can use one of their exceptions to place a mobile home on their property for that person. But they have to fill out an application. It's in the planning department, and one of the questions is this in a restricted, are mobile homes restricted? Is this a restricted piece of property? Are there valid recorded restrictions that go with this property? If there are that prohibit it, they can't allow that mobile home there. If it doesn't have enough square footage to meet Department of Health and sewer requirements, it cannot. You can't just grant the variance. It must meet all of those requirements first. So there you have it. They've got to fill out that application in order to get the permit to place it on that mobile home, on that lot. If it's in a recorded subdivision, whether you think it's enforceable or not, if it's recorded and valid within our courthouse until those restrictions are amended by a court of law, they are valid. So you can't get involved in deciding because that person says, oh, well, they got 2 mobile homes down the street. If it's not been deemed invalid, that restriction, it holds true. So you can't allow it. There's the key.
We need to, I'm sorry for cutting.
And also, if you wanted, I applaud and am so grateful. I applaud your intent. I know, but you said, part of what you say is that the developers and the intent of the homeowners is that it all be nice house. Intent is great. But we all know that unless it's written,
Well, that's what I'm
and the restrictions are written and recorded in our courthouse.
But the restrictions aren't, at DPW, we don't enforce the restrictions upon your issue of permit. We don't, I mean, that's just, it's not something we do.
The question is,
And secondly, covenants after a period of time are no longer valid.
that is not true.
Well.
That is not true. That is not true. That is,
Well, depending on how they're designed, that is true.
I mean,
the bottom line is covenants are a civil, if there is a disagreement on the restrictions, that is between the homeowners and that is decided in a civil court of law. But the restrictions, the recorded restrictions that are presented by the developer are held in your courthouse. And unless they are amended, they are valid. So that's what I'm saying. It's easy enough. We have within the mobile home park ordinance, there is exceptions for mobile homes. There are exceptions to place because by definition, more than 1 mobile home on a legal lot becomes a mobile home park. So we did grant, it is by law that there are 3 exceptions allowed per family members or property owners.
that's not.
But that's what I'm saying. You're saying that anybody who presents a permit, say, I live on East Ridge Drive. We are a recorded subdivision. We have recorded covenants within your courthouse. I have 2-acre lots. And yes, I stand in fear every day that one of my homeowners would say, my neighbors would say, well, my son's really hit on hard times. I think I'll put him a mobile home behind my house. But wait a minute.
Support me 100% to get this ordinance.
But that won't fly. That will never be adopted, what you're saying. It won't be adopted. Perhaps you should. We have the keys. We have the keys already. We have the keys within your mobile home park ordinance, and you have the keys with recorded valid restrictions. They're already there. You don't have to decide whether they're valid. They are recorded in your courthouse, and unless they are amended and changed by a court of law, that you have to assume that they are valid. If a homeowner says, well, I want to put one on it because so-and-so has one, then your job is to say, we have standing valid restrictions that say no mobile homes. work it out, come back to us with a court document that says that restriction is no longer valid and will allow you.
So it's-
You don't want to get involved, you say you're not going to get involved, but then you do get involved when you take the homeowner's side or property owner's side who says they're not enforceable.
Well, let me-
That's not
Let
true.
me ask you a question. Okay, so there's no residence on a piece of property. So you keep talking about the.
There's no what?
Okay, you keep talking about when you put the second mobile home on a piece of property. We got a piece of property with no residence on it. I go down to the permit office to buy a permit. I'm putting one mobile home on one lot. All I do is make an application, I'm granted it. Right?
You have to,
No, I'm buying a permit for one mobile home on one lot that has
Right.
nothing else on
And
it.
it's
I
to
got
the
that-
best
I
of
got
my
So
that.
I
knowledge.
don't have to ask for an exception.
I'm not saying that. That's in one instance.
Okay,
in
so
your-
I do that. So it doesn't matter what my subdivision restrictions are, the permit office doesn't enforce restrictions.
No, they do not.
Do
So
they
I-
have, wait a minute.
They don't.
Wait a second, you've
They-
talked, I want you to answer my question for me.
Okay, I will.
So they don't enforce restrictions.
They do not.
So they grant me the permit, I move my trailer out there, the only recourse that exists is for somebody to hire a lawyer to sue me.
Correct.
And there
That's
are,
correct.
wait a second, I
That's
understand
correct.
what you're saying, but John's trying to create an environment where those people don't have to hire an attorney to sue because a lot of them don't have the upfront money.
I agree.
Okay, so that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to create a situation that those people don't have to hire an attorney to make this a civil matter. We're trying to create a law that says if you have an established named subdivision, you can't get a trailer permit for it. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to get an exception to a house. If you've got a lot in a named subdivision, it is illegal to you to be issued a trailer permit. That's all we're trying to do. As of right now, it's not.
Right.
And I understand that you think there are protections, but those protections are going to cost the people that live around them money.
know. I've already been a victim of that.
Whom
I
don't
know.
have the money to do that. So all we're trying to do is create an environment so that the permit will never be issued, so nobody has to sue anybody.
Right. So,
Hey,
so we
high five.
Okay,
I'm all
that's all
about
we're
it.
trying to do. I understand what you're saying, but.
But here's,
we're-
but can I just,
Go. Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't got to say what I would say.
the app, I'm telling you, the keys are within your, I don't know that, my concern is, I applaud your intent. I've been screaming this from the rafters for years. Yes, as a homeowner of a 350,000 plus house, I do want to protect my investment, and I don't want a mobile home next door to me. I get that. So, yes, but I'm afraid that the way it is written, when you say a named and established subdivision, there are named and established subdivisions that are like Robinwood. That is for mobile homes. We're going to get into a problem with people saying, well, the fight's going to be, well, just because you have a house that's brick and mortar, you think you're better than a house with a mobile home.
Can I talk yet?
The simple, what?
We only got like 5
Okay,
minutes
I know,
left.
but
This is
can I
5
just
minutes.
finish? Because I keep trying to get to this. I'm not against
Okay.
y'all.
Okay,
But
you
what
got
I'm
about-
saying
you got about
is,
2 minutes.
there is an application. If you review the application that has to be filled out for the exceptions, you have to present the legal description of the lot, the piece of land that you are going to
What
put it on.
application are you referring to?
What we're
application
talking,
are you referring to?
what we're talking about is not something that's got to have an exception. If you're not putting the second
I don't want you to have an exception. There's a simple question that says,
When do you have to fill that out? When you're putting the second trailer on a piece of
it's
property?
within the planning department. It has to be filled out for a mobile. I'm just saying that
You
that
talk about for a
one,
mobile home park.
I got to ask you a couple of questions.
do you have, when you go to get your permit,
First of all,
why are y'all
piece of
upset
property-
with me? I'm simply
not
trying to
upset.
help.
What about a piece of
I'm simply
property
trying to
that's
help.
going to
Validity
be
to what you're saying.
re-subdivided?
I'm sorry, say
What
that.
about a piece of property that people's trying to re-subdivide to put mobile homes on?
If that property, for instance, My subdivision says no further subdividing
Well,
of the
this is
lots.
in
I'd like to make a
Brown
motion.
Road Acres is the name of
I think we need to change the
it.
word.
Well, it's a
Right.
named subdivision, basically.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And are there restrictions, recorded restrictions that say no mobile
Okay, we
homes?
gotta end this meeting. We're not gonna get to talk about the
You've
roads
already
tonight.
got the keys.
Hold on. Okay, so I think there is some validity to what you're saying, okay? We do have named subdivisions that are specifically designed in this parish for mobile homes. You know, double wides, you know, you'll go to a subdivision, they'll have double wides everywhere, okay? In that subdivision, it was designed for that. It was intended, the intended purpose was for that, you know? And what we're trying to do, okay, and I'm not saying that we don't need to modify this wording because I actually think we do, okay? But what we're trying to do is if you purchased a piece of property, okay, and the property was within a subdivision and the intended purpose was to build a certain size home, okay, and protect the property value, you know, that's why you did that, then we're not going to allow you to go be able to put a mobile home inside that subdivision, okay? And then go back to the whole permitting process, okay? To the best of my knowledge, they do not look at the restrictions that's against that property within that subdivision as far as it's developed, when it was developed, okay? They do not do that, okay? So one could get a permit to put the mobile home within there, and then yes, it would go into that civil court matter, okay? And you'd have to hire the attorneys, and it would go back and forth. Meanwhile, the trailer's still there, and also, forgot what I was going to say, but what I'm saying is there have been cases where if every single restriction that was posted against that piece of property within that subdivision wasn't followed to the T, well then every single one of those restrictions was invalid. So if you have a restriction where you have to have a certain size shed, and it's got to be, you know, adjacent to the house and all that kind of stuff, or maybe you have to have a window unit or something, no window units, you know, something to that effect. If somebody went and put one and you didn't enforce that restriction, then that gives the other guy validity to break the restrictions and put a mobile home. So what we're trying to do is protect the property values of the citizens within the subdivisions, okay, and put something in place to do that, okay? Now, we need to go back and look at the wording, okay, because I do think that
What do you not like about that word?
basically, I think if you put it in there just like this, then you're saying that you can't have any subdivisions within the parish with a mobile home inside of it. That's what I feel like
Well,
this is saying.
It says with the intent of single-family dwelling houses. Robinwood was
Can
designed.
you, all right, so define single dwelling house. Is a mobile home not a single dwelling house? Yes, it is.
It's a
Okay?
manufactured house. I mean, it's.
Go back into
Go
what
read
they
the
manufacture these days.
go read the restrictions of Robert Wood. It specifically talks about manufactured housing.
But we ain't talking about restrictions. We're not looking at restrictions. What we're trying to do is develop an ordinance that doesn't allow the mobile home.
What do you think, what would you want to change on this?
I need more time, but we need to go back and establish some type of wording that would allow someone to develop a subdivision.
This doesn't stop you from developing a subdivision.
It stops you from developing a subdivision and allowing mobile homes to go into a subdivision where a subdivision was designed for mobile homes.
No, it's not.
No, it doesn't.
This specifically talks
If
about.
it's just mobile homes in a subdivision, then that would be fine if that's the way they develop it.
Right, but I think that if you keep it worded the way it is, you're saying you can't do that. Okay, look.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to send this to the council with a favorable recommendation with Mr. Chris Moody while he's here at the meeting to tell us if we have issues with it.
I
If we
second that
don't,
motion.
if we don't, then we'll.
I can tell you, I've already talked to Chris, and we need to address the wording in this ordinance.
Okay, well then
But
that's
that's
fine.
fine.
We'll address it tonight, and if we can't get it straight tonight, we'll defer it to next week,
Okay.
2 weeks from now. I'll make a
Look,
motion.
and
John seconds it.
another thing too is, I want to add some other stuff in here that's going on that I think that we need to prevent from going in subdivisions. That's why I wanted to extend it.
Well, John wants to stop mobile homes from going in subdivisions. So we can amend this ordinance later to add the other
Thank you,
stuff.
Mr. Towner.
But I make the motion and John seconded it. Y'all we want to vote on it?
We can, yeah.
You want to call for the vote?
Say that again?
Mr. Talbert?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes.
Okay, you want to talk about B or you want to defer B?
No, I gotta go to the restroom and the other meeting starts at 6. We're gonna have to defer, item